Hello, students. I'm here today to talk to you again about Wikipedia and why I think it's the place to start. First of all, I better tell you about my bias. You already know it. I donate to Wikipedia and I am a huge fan. I use it every day, as does um, everyone that I believe in and agree with. Wikipedia is awesome, and I'll tell you why. Wikipedia is where you ought to start every single research project you ever do. First of all, Wikipedia is one of the only neutral sources that you're going to find on the internet. When we did our bias assignment, you probably noticed that bias is everywhere. Everyone and everything is bias, and neutrality is really rare. It's hard to find. So, how does Wikipedia achieve it? Well, Wikipedia works together and achieves neutrality by collaboration. So, when everybody, hundreds of thousands of editors working together and discussing how they can present information in the most accurate and neutral way, they are able to achieve a measure of neutrality that is really difficult to find anywhere else on the internet. So, as you know, neutrality is an important part of credibility. So, the information that you find on Wikipedia is achieved because everybody, all of the Wikipedia editors work together, and that is their specific goal, is to remain neutral and to provide accurate information. So there are some other videos that I linked in this section about how you edit Wikipedia, which would give you an idea of how they go about achieving this neutrality. The real reason that I think you need to start at Wikipedia is because it gives you a great amount of background information. A lot of my students, sometimes they'll write papers and I can tell they don't really understand their topic very well. Sometimes they'll misuse words or they'll explain concepts in the wrong way. Other times they'll start using a lot of quotes. This is a dead giveaway that they don't know what they're talking about, because lots of times, if they don't know how to summarize it, they'll just copy and paste it, stick some quotes around it, and put it in their paper. And it doesn't really fit in the paragraph that they're writing about most of the time. So it's a dead giveaway that you're clueless when you use quotations. I prefer that you use summaries. Unless, of course, the quote is really pithy, which most of the quotes you guys use are not. So don't use quotes, and understand your topic well enough to explain it to your reader in your own voice. The second thing that Wikipedia gives you is vocabulary. In order to discuss topics in an educated way, in an academic way, you're going to need to learn some new words. Every topic you learn about almost has its own separate language, and you have to learn that language in order to really converse on any sort of intelligent way about that topic. It'll also help you to formulate questions. When you write a research paper, unless you're doing something super general, which is kind of an elementary school thing to do, you're going to want to narrow your topic down a little bit. You're going to want to find a question that would make a good thesis statement. It makes your articles more interesting. Wikipedia can help you find what are those questions that are out there about the topic. It'll also help you generate some of your own questions and subtopics. So, the last but not least, Wikipedia is an awesome source of sources. Wikipedia, most teachers will tell you, is not a credible source. Mostly they say that because it is a secondary source. The editors of Wikipedia usually are not the ones that are the experts. They are quoting other experts. So, but however, they will give you the link to the expert and you can go get it directly from the horse's mouth. So, Wikipedia is a great source of sources. Let me show you how I would go about doing Wikipedia. Say I was studying genetic modification and I wanted to, and I came across something about CRISPR, which seemed really interesting. It's one of the most exciting things happening in our world today is um, the new technology called CRISPR. Well, I'm going to go look up CRISPR in Wikipedia so that I can learn more about it, because guess what? There's a whole lot of stuff I don't understand. All of this is practically a whole new language for me. I'm not going to move on into doing my research about CRISPR until I totally understand everything on this Wikipedia article. Otherwise, it's going to show through, and my teacher can tell that I'm BSing it. So what I need to do is I'm going to have to learn a lot of new words. I'm going to need to know genomes, prokaryotic, bacteria, archaea, bacteriophages, lots of new words. If I have a new word that I don't understand, if I hover over it and it's in blue in Wikipedia, it'll give me a short summary. And sometimes that's enough to help me. Sometimes it's not. And so I'll have to click it instead of just hovering over it, and it'll take me to the website where I can learn more about prokaryotes. Now, if there's so much on Wikipedia that it is going to take me a year to learn all of these words, I probably don't really want to write a research paper on this topic if it's going to take me too long to understand the Wikipedia page. But if you can't understand the Wikipedia page, you really shouldn't be writing a research paper on it. So I'm going to spend time learning all of these terms in Wikipedia. So the other important thing is Wikipedia is going to help me find good search terms, right? Because if I type in um, changing genes into Google, I'm not going to find some very awesome sources. But if I type in CRISPR gene editing, I'm likely to find some really great, credible sources that I can use for my research paper. So a search term is something that you type into Google, and Wikipedia can help you find some of those great search terms. So you learn the background information, you learn the vocabulary, and you find some search terms that should help you. Those are the first three reasons why Wikipedia is so great. The second reason why Wikipedia is so great is it gives me lots of subtopics. Here in bold, all of these are different subtopics that I might want to learn about. I usually find my most interesting subtopics near the end of Wikipedia. Sometimes it'll talk about the controversies, sometimes it'll talk about other applications or things like that. These are usually for me the topics that I find most interesting. So, like for example, here it talks about CRISPR being used in plant species, CRISPR being used to treat genetic disorders, CRISPR used being helping us find out the relationships of other gene diseases and things like that. Using CRISPR to diagnose diseases. So these are going to be great subtopics to help me narrow down my research paper. So the other thing it's going to do is it's going to help me find credible sources. Teachers are right when they tell you don't cite Wikipedia. Don't use Wikipedia as one of the sources that you mention in your research paper. But, however, if you find an interesting fact in Wikipedia, it will always be cited and they'll tell you where they got that information. For example, if you're interested in how CRISPR is being used in plants or for food items, you can see here that this fact is that it recently has been used to modify several plant species. And you'll notice this number right after it. Well, that number, if you hover over it, it will tell you where they got that information. Now, if I click on it, it'll take me right to that source. And that source is going to be a source that I can cite. It's going to be a really valid source, in fact, because in order for people to post things on Wikipedia, usually a group of other people that are interested in the topic will get together and they'll determine whether that's valid information coming from a credible source. So the sources on Wikipedia are super credible, and then you don't have to determine whether it's a credible source. You don't have to ask Mrs. Brown if it's a credible source because if it's on Wikipedia, it's probably fairly credible source. So the National Institutes of Health is an amazing source. Your teachers will be super impressed that you were able to find it. So this will be a great source talking about plant biology. So in addition to these little numbers right after the facts, that you can use to go get information from the horse's mouth, at the very bottom, it'll say references and it'll have a list of all of the different references that the Wikipedia editors used to build this article. So you can scroll through and look at these and find if any of these would be helpful for your research paper because they're all going to be great sources. That's why I say Wikipedia is a source of sources. So before you Google anything, Wikipedia it. I hope that helps. Bye.